So in this video, we're going to talk about the order of operations. So before I actually go over anything in this video, once you've got your notes out and turned to this page, I would actually like to see if you can try to fill in this first box. If you know what PEMDAS stands for, the P, the E, the M, the D, the A, the S, I want you to pause and try to fill that in on your own, just to try to recall it. If you don't, then you'll play through and kind of see me explain it anyways. All right, so the P stands for parentheses. And oftentimes you can call these grouping symbols too. It's not necessarily just parentheses, but parentheses kind of includes most of them. So another type of grouping symbol besides parentheses you might see the farther we get into algebra are some brackets. Absolute value symbols where there's something in between those bars. And then there's a different type of square brackets you could see. And then of course you still have your parentheses if you wanted to add those in there. But all of those are grouping symbols and go under this P category. So that's what we do first, following the order of operations. Next, the E stands for exponents. Okay. The M and the D I like to write next to each other because we actually do these from left to right. So M isn't necessarily always first, D isn't always first. It depends on what comes first from left to right. So M stands for multiplication, and D stands for division. And then let's make a note that we always do these from left to right. Okay, so sometimes we'll divide first, sometimes we'll multiply first, just depends. So that's the same thing with this last step. Addition and subtraction, we always do from left to right. Okay, so really I always say there's 4 steps to the order of operations because these are one step here because we're doing them from left to right. So to further clarify, exponents you don't work a lot with in 7th grade. We'll see them more in 8th grade. So I wanted to look at a couple examples here, and then we'll do the same thing with absolute value before we do some practice problems. So when we're looking at an exponent, the little number that's kind of up above, that's actually the exponent, if we're talking about vocabulary. Okay, the big number is called the base. So the only number that actually appears when we're looking at the expanded form of an exponent is the base. The exponent just tells us how many times that's going to be multiplied together. So this is going to be 2 times 2 times 2. The only number that appears is the base there. So first we do the first set. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 again gives us 8. A lot of people want to multiply these to tell me that 2 to the 3rd power is 6, which is not correct. Yes, exponents involve multiplication, but it's just multiplication of the base. You're multiplying by itself. The exponent tells us how many times we're going to do that. So in this case, this is not 4 times 2, it's 4 times 4, which gives us 16. Okay, so that's just a little bit on exponents. Absolute value is always a positive answer, the distance from 0. So these absolute value symbols here are telling us, well, how far is negative 13 from 0? Well, it's 13 spots. And it's positive. Distance can never be negative. I can't ever say I ran a negative 2 miles, right? You're always going a positive distance. So when we talk about distance, it's always positive. So inside absolute values, we could just have one number, or we could have operations. So if you have operations, these work like parentheses, right? That's why we put them up here. First, you have to do everything inside those parentheses first. So the 15 subtract 23 gives us a negative 8, and our absolute value symbols are still there. Then we do this distance from 0 absolute value, which then makes it positive. Okay, so here we have to do our grouping symbols first. So the first thing that happens is this 9 becomes positive. The absolute values go away after we do that, and then we're going to subtract 14. So here I've got to keep change to see that our answer is a negative 5. So you can get a negative answer when you have problems that have absolute value. It all depends on the order you have to do those things in. Okay. So we're going to do 4 examples kind of together in this video. You're going to pause and try one, play to check your answer, and we'll move on to the next one. So pause, and I want you to do this first one here in your notes, and then play to see how you did. So if we're looking at order of operations, I have division and multiplication here. So remember, those are both in step 3. So we're going to do those from left to right. So division comes first. So I always like you guys to underline the first step you do. Okay, it's really going to help you stay organized. Trust me, just do it. Okay, so negative 24 divided by a positive 12 is going to give us a negative 2, and then copy down the rest of the problem. Okay, and I am going to be picky about how you guys do these problems, because in our next unit it's going to help you. Some of our problems this year will get really long, and if you don't keep your work organized, you are going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so next step, we're going to underline what we're going to do, which is going to be to do that multiplication now. So this negative 2 just comes down, and we do 3 times the negative 5, which gives us negative 15. Now, I put negative 2 plus negative 15. If you wrote this step here as negative 2 subtract 15, that is the same thing, so that is okay. So then we just have our last step here to give us negative 17 as our final answer. I want you guys to circle your answers. We would get the same thing here because we would keep change, and then we'd get negative 17. So it's kind of just preference how you like to write this step right there. Okay, so when you do the next one, if you weren't like underlining and rewriting the problem every time, I want you to do that here. I'll be checking for that in your notes. So again, I've got division and multiplication. Left to right tells me I'm going to divide first. So I get negative 4, and then I'm going to bring down everything else. Next step is going to be to multiply. So I'm going to bring down my negative 4, and then I get a negative 30. Last step here, I get negative 34. Circle your answer. Okay, circling your answer really just helps me when I'm walking around looking at your notes, looking at in-class practice, looking at tests to really help just spot your answer. So go ahead and try the next one here and then play through. So we've got lots of things going on in this problem. So we've got division, exponents, and a grouping symbol, which falls under our parentheses. So first is the parentheses. So everything else just gets copied down, keeping our work nice and organized. So I'm going to keep change here. Remember, my absolute values are still there because I have to do what's inside first. So that gives me negative 8 because I'm going to subtract those because I have different signs. So, and then the next step is to actually do that absolute value. So that's normally a pretty quick step. Some of you might have done that in one step here. You might have just gone to plus 8. That's okay too. So next step is going to be to do our exponent there. So I'm bringing down my negative 36. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. Now I can do my division, which gives me negative 4. And then the last step here makes positive 4. Okay, one more problem to try. Pause the video. So we do have grouping symbols here, our parentheses, which is our first step, but we have to do everything inside of that. So these are actually kind of almost waiting till the end. So inside the parentheses, we have to follow order of operations also. So the first thing inside would be these exponents. So I'm going to keep my absolute value, copy everything else down, and then 5 squared gives us 25. That's 5 times 5. Then inside these absolute values, I can multiply. So I'm going to keep my absolute value, do my multiplication. Still keeping your absolute value because you have to add these together. In order to add them, we are subtracting because we've got 2 different signs. So that gives us negative 84. Absolute value then at the very last step makes that answer a positive negative 4. So notice your absolute value doesn't change any of these other negative signs until the end when we actually do those absolute value symbols.